Yes.
All right, so I'm going to officially start the meeting.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, you have a nice bell there.
That's expensive crystal because I don't have a real bell. So, but it works. But it works. It works. It works. It does a good job. It's called improvisation. When you don't have what you need, you improvise. Well, welcome everybody to our meeting this evening for I believe it's 3. Yes, it is 3 on the calendar. 3 February 2021. Question I have for all of you, just to stop and think for a moment. Where were you and what were you doing on 3 February of 2020? You probably were not on Zoom. You might have been at a Rotary meeting, but you probably were not on Zoom. You probably were not halfway around the world from the United States to Russia to Asia to all over Europe. You probably were not there. You were probably somewhere local, unless you were traveling on a business trip. The world has changed in the last year. We don't know what the future is going to be. None of us do. Armadeus said he knew what it was going to be like 100 years later. He proved to be wrong. So I think most of us are going to make predictions of what's going to happen after this pandemic is gone, and we'll be wrong. So it's difficult to prognosticate what's going to happen, but many, many people do. And here at Rotary, in our club at least, we like to try to stay away from that and talk about things that are going on right now. What's happening today? Don't plan so far ahead in the future, but what can we do today to make tomorrow better? And that's something that we've been working on for a long time in this club, and that's sort of where we're headed. That's where we want to stay. I'd like to say again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our guests from all over the world. I'd like to welcome our district governor. And if he would like to, Ildus, if you'd like to say a few words for us before we start the meeting.
Yes, I'd like to know that I am very appreciative for my invitation. You provide very interesting meetings. What you are the member of the Toastmasters. Now we started our close cooperation with this great network of speakers around the globe. So I hope that most of our Rotarians join to Toastmasters clubs too in our Russia. So I am very interested in the theme because I'm a traveler too, and for me it's very interesting how our Russian guides start a new life in the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's appreciate that. I was just talking to my Toastmaster friends in Singapore today, and I did a little calculation. In the last 53 years, I have spent more nights in Asia than I did in the United States. My eyes are not slanted, and I don't eat rice 3 times a day, but I spent more nights in Asia than I did the United States in the last 53 years. So we get around the world as Rotarians and as Toastmasters. I would like to go ahead and for all of you, if you don't know about it, this is a tradition in our club that we're doing. We're going to go through the 4-way test, and I bring this out at each meeting. And if you will, please, I'm going to ask you all, if everybody, if you will, please turn on your microphone. Everybody, please turn on your microphone, unmute yourself. Okay, I'm going to read the 4-way test. After I read each one of the 4, I will say it, and then I'm going to ask all of you to repeat what I have just said on the 4-way test. Okay, the 4-way test of the things that we say, think, and do. Number 1, is it the truth?
Is it the truth?
Truth.
Number 2, is it fair to all concerned?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Will it build goodwill and better friendship?
Will it build goodwill and better
friendship?
Is it fair to all concerned?
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
And the fifth element, will it be fun?
Thank you very much. If you'll all turn off your microphones again now, please. because we don't want to interrupt the people who are speaking. It's courtesy. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I have my president's comments that I'm going to make for the opening tonight. I think that it's going to be a crazy springtime. My opinion is that things are going to be changing and we're going to have to change right along with it. What are you going to do in the next couple months? Better question, what would you do in the next couple months if the pandemic went away? If tomorrow it went to zero, if tomorrow nobody else got sick, nobody else died, what would you do now that you have the freedom to do some of the things you did before? I think that's an interesting question. We're not going to go through all 27 of us to answer it now, but I'll tell you that I wish you would think about it, because as Rotarians, we have to get on with our lives. We have to continue to serve. We have to continue to help, and we need to continue to lead our individual clubs and organizations that we're responsible for. Some of you, like Elis, are at a higher level. You're a district governor or somewhere else in the organization. You have a responsibility to keep Rotary going. That's with the virus or without the virus. So we're always thinking about what we're doing now, fighting it while it's going on, but what would you do if it was gone? This is a question that I have posed to several people, and we find it interesting. And something else, we also find it puts a smile on their face when they say, whoa, well, if I was gone, I would do this or I do that. And they start to have some pleasant thoughts. Pleasant thoughts are absolutely imperative right now. When you're in this kind of crisis situation, and we've been locked down many places around the world for several months, some more than others, putting a smile on people's face is absolutely imperative. You need to do it. So I would suggest to you, when you wake up in the morning and you look in the mirror, if you see 2 smiles instead of 1, I suggest you go out and give the other smile to somebody who's not smiling. We need to help people be in the right mood, and we need people to be thinking in the right direction. Please help those around you to smile and understand that Rotary will continue no matter what, and Rotary will recover once we're allowed to and do the things that we need to do again. We will go forward and Rotary will continue to be great. So those are my opening comments as a president. I'd like to turn it over to Randall for a few minutes so that we can hear his comments as a secretary. There's a lot of different activities, and I'd like to hear from him as to what's going on and keep us up to date. Randall, all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. As you can see, I've got 2 presences here. One's a backup, so I'm going to screen share from my computer, but I'm talking from my phone. So hopefully this is going to work well. Let me just switch on the screen share. Okay, where'd you go? Should be that. Can you see? Yeah, okay, you can see that. Let me just put it under play. Okay, so Secretary's notes for today. First note, it's very pleasant that we have DG Ildus here today, because I just came back from the post office. I had discovered in my WhatsApp that we have received a New Year's present from DG Ildus, and also from our past assistant Governor Anna and our DGE Margarita. So it took me a while to figure out how. It looks like a little hat, but there is a message here. There's a letter, and it took me actually quite a long time to figure out how to unfold it, which I did. And here you can see there is a letter from DG Ildus on the front, which was just about as difficult for me to read as the letters my wife used to write me 20 plus years ago. Fortunately, this is written by a computer. I didn't have time to translate it. I would actually like to type it out and translate it. It was a really wonderful letter from DG Ildus, and then on the back there's a letter also from DG Anna and from DGE Margarita. So thank you very much, Ildus. I have a bag right behind me, and as soon as we figure out some way, Michael, that we can get together physically, I will give everybody this gift, which is very nice.
Yes, brief Rotary more every day.
Thank you very much, Ildus. Thank you.
The second note, on an international level, you may already know that the International Convention, it's now been declared, will be only virtual. So it was scheduled to be in Taipei. It will, I guess, be somewhat in Taipei, but it will be online. So all of us can join at a much reduced cost. Also interesting today that we have the German representative of the Germany-Russia ICC. Well, I received a message just a couple of days ago from Tatiana Brovkina, who is the Russian head of the Germany-Russia ICC, and they're particularly interested in inviting our German-speaking members to join. And perhaps we can.
Yeah, I do this as
would you like to say
chair
something?
of the German committee.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate the ICC's involvement. Thank you.
Okay, now let's get to the next one. Next thing I noted that there is a regional assembly in Togliatti. This assembly is actually being held offline and online. I just got the initial note today. I don't see how we can register for it online, but if you can put it in your calendars, it'll take place on between the 19th and 21st of February. And if any of you are not aware, Russia District 2223 is actually a pilot district, and it is split into regions. So we have a district governor, but we also have people responsible for each of the different regions because the country is so big. And there are regional assemblies happening in each region this year. I don't know if DG Ildis would like to say anything about regional assembly.
Yes, I'd like to know that we will provide only assembly in 19th of February, and 20 and 21 of February we'll provide the team training of new team training. So if somebody of you would like to work to serve in our team, you are very welcome to join to our team training in 20th of February. So, and we'll provide it mostly in online because all the events prohibited in face-to-face, so we'll provide just online in online format.
Okay.
Online style, yeah.
I have a question, Randall.
Sure. Yep.
Ildis, will any of that be in English or will it all be in Russian?
All event will be in Russian.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we don't have Gabriele here tonight, who's an active member of the Germany-Russia ICC. She's our past president, and she introduced us to a very interesting man who will be speaking next week, Reinhard Kuhn, who has for almost my whole life been a radio amateur operator, and he's helped the Chinese communicate with their moon mission, which is pretty cool. So we'll hear about that next week. And 3 weeks after that, we will have our own past president, Alexander Siboni, who was here last week. He is a past president of the club from 2007 to 8, and he's a charter member of our club. And he will come and speak to us about the origin story of the Rotary Club of St. Petersburg International. Excuse me. He was actively involved in the club for 8 years until he moved back to Denmark. And I think I found where he is. So he's a member of the Rotary Club of Stega, which I presume is actually the town or city of Stega. And I noted that if you look sort of as the arrow enters the map, just below that is Flensburg. So I think Gabriela is quite close to Alexander. And finally, if you haven't noticed, we have a presence on several different social media. We encourage you to like us, especially the YouTube channel. We now have 5 followers. It would be nice if we had 6 or even 10 or 1,000. We're recording all of our meetings and clean them up a little bit, and then we're posting them on the YouTube channel so that people can take a look if they don't have a chance to come to join us in person. And with that, Michael, that's all I have to say for today. So I will stop sharing and hand the.
I have one additional memo that I mentioned to you earlier, Randall, as our secretary, that I talked to Andres Bone, the treasurer, on the phone a few minutes before the meeting started, and he has agreed that on the 24th of February, he will give a occupational presentation. And this is something new for all you members. This is something that we're starting now with our membership. We will be going each month and asking one of our members to give an occupational speech so that we know just a little bit more about their classification, what they're classified as and what they've been doing, just to bring us closer to their skill level or their skills that they have. This is always good to know in Rotary who your membership are and what their skills are. So we'll be having our members give short speeches over the next several months so that we can learn a little bit better about all of our meetings. I know
Michael?
this is, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Michael, can I just add to that, it was wonderful that Gabriella introduced us to a speaker. Nancy Lewis in Canada has introduced us to a speaker. Antonina has introduced us to a speaker. If any of you who are with us today know anyone who you think is an interesting speaker who could join us and would be interested in speaking to us in both Europe and North America in this time zone, please let me know. We welcome all suggestions.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we will at the end have a message. I will have a message for you at the end of the meeting. And again, we will be asking for anyone out there who knows of a speaker at any level, because we have had ex-Rotary presidents, we've had vice presidents, we've had directors, we've had people from around the world with Rotary projects, lots of different folks. And normally they are super, and we're very, very pleased with them. So we still are looking for many, many more, because with an audience like this, and we're up to 28 people right now, with an audience like this of this caliber, we certainly want to give them something that is beneficial for everybody. So thank you very, very much. Dmitry, I'm going to be with you in just a moment, and I'm going to give you the floor. We're almost there. Our speaker today is Dmitry Orlov, and he's going to talk about Russia, an island with a bright future in a sea of losers. Now, Dmitry is a very, very interesting individual. He's a linguist, a futurist, an adventurer, and an author. Now, even though he was born in Russia, he went to the United States when he was 12 years old, got a computer engineering degree and an applied linguistics degree. And in 2007, he decided to do something different. I'm sure that all of you have decided to do this at some time in your life, but you didn't act on it. He decided that him and his wife should buy a sailboat, get in that sailboat and sail for 6 months. He stocked up on food, all the propane, all the things he needed, and off they went. He calls his ship a survival capsule. How many of you have done that already? Probably not many. Maybe a few have done something on a smaller scale, but this is commitment. This is dedication. This is the decision to go forward. And he made that decision. He likes to use a bicycle for transportation. And be careful if you have any dealings with Dmitry. He liked to tell a little story where when he was in Russia, he actually used vodka to barter for some supplies that he needed. He says, you know, one should stop thinking about wealth in terms of money. It's what you have that we can, during a time of a collapse or a time of a catastrophic situation, you use what you can to survive. And he is a survivor, definitely a survivor. So I think that we're going to enjoy our speech tonight. I think it's going to be very interesting, and I'm going to turn it over to Dmitry, and it's all yours, fella. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me fine? Okay, good. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at your meeting. It is really my pleasure. Now, the title of the talk is Russia, an island with a bright future in a sea of losers. I don't mean to insult anyone. The losers in this case are entire regions and countries, not by any means individuals. It's intentionally provocative because I want to provoke some thought and maybe some probing questions from you and some discussion. The title of this talk is probably at odds with the common perception about Russia, but common perceptions are often wrong. the common perception tends to be that Russia is a cold, vast, remote, hostile, poor, and corrupt country, except maybe for cold, because thanks to global warming, it's warming up. People have said bad things about Russia that stuck in people's minds. John McCain called it a gas station masquerading as a country. Barack Obama once said that its economy is in shreds. It's as if they've never been to the place. Also, there are a lot of Russian emigres that have bad things to say about it, and most of them happen to be untrue. You know, emigres suffer from a certain syndrome that causes them to tell you what they think you want to hear. They're just trying to fit in a new place. That they can be forgiven for doing that. Another common perception is that Russia is run by oligarchs and by Putin personally. Such a vast place cannot really be run by a single person. And the oligarchs are really a throwback to the 1990s. There aren't any left. They've all fled or committed suicide or went to jail or something like that. And as far as Putin, he has an approval rating among the Russian people that is really to die for. He's probably the most popular national leader there is in the world. Another bit of fiction is that Russia wants to restore the USSR. Not true, and I'll get to why a little later. So a couple of words about myself. I was born in Leningrad, emigrated to the US as a teenager. I've been going back between the US and Russia, back and forth since Perestroika. And now I'm living back in what is now St. Petersburg, and I'm quite happy here. I'm an engineer by training. I worked in high energy physics, internet commerce, internet security, and a few other areas. And now I'm working as a writer. I've written a dozen books. They've been published in a dozen languages or so. I also run a blog at cluborlov.blogspot.com. And I also provide some publications that are by subscription. I have a few thousand subscribers. I have pioneered the study of comparative collapse. This is something that I can claim for my own. How the collapse of the USSR compares to the forthcoming collapse of the USA. It's a very fruitful area of research with many insights. More insights are coming in every single day. So let's talk about Russia. What makes Russia different from any other country in the world? Well, first of all, it owns a huge chunk of Eurasia, which is the planet's largest continent, and has a fantastically huge resource base, bigger than any other country in the world. It is self-sufficient in energy, food, and most everything else that's critical. It has a powerful super ethnos. The Russians are really a mosaic of other nations that on the outside look Russian, but the closer you look, the more little distinctions you see. So Russian is a lingua franca for a vast area, and many people speaking hundreds of different languages use Russian to communicate. It's the fourth largest language by, fourth most popular language by the number of publications. So the Russians are basically, punching well above their weight category. The only two competing super ethnic groups that I can single out is the Anglo-Saxon, which is looking a bit tired lately, to tell you the truth. I don't think the Anglos really want to run the world anymore. And the Chinese, which are up and coming. Russia is not overpopulated. This is a very important thing. There's plenty of room to grow. It really has the world's largest per capita resource base. Another thing about Russia is that it really doesn't have to worry about its enemies. It won the arms race. This is a permanent state of affairs. The US recently extending the New START treaty with no preconditions of any sort is a capitulation. The US aircraft carrier fleet is useless. The B-52 strategic bombers are useless, and the other bombers it has are pseudo stealth bombers and are also useless. The Minuteman missiles are obsolete, and a lot of people are wondering, does the US still have a nuclear deterrent at all? Maybe not. And then there are huge big ticket failures. The F-35 fighter, which is basically half of them don't even fly. The littoral ship concept, which basically don't sail. Then there are the Abrams tanks, for which there's no way to produce engines anymore and no way to produce gun barrels. So they're just recycling old spare parts, cannibalizing the existing ones. And the Pentagon is best looked at as 35 trillion or so accounting black hole. It's really a way of cutting up budget money, not a way of providing defense of any sort. Russia leads in a key area that's going to be extremely important as oil and natural gas grow scarce over the coming decades, and that's nuclear energy. Russia's nuclear agency, Rosatom, owns 3/4 of the world's reactor portfolio. That's all the reactors being built around the world. The only real competitor is China. Russia is the only country in the world that has fast neutron reactor technology. There's one running at Krasnoyarskaya AES, BN 800. It's breeding plutonium. Russia is pioneering the closed nuclear cycle system, which will make it possible to use depleted plutonium as fuel. There's enough depleted plutonium in the world already mined, basically just sitting above ground in storage to fuel the entire civilization of the planet for thousands of years. Russia, by some estimates, needs to build about 10 new reactors a year and electrify transportation to get off fossil fuels, and it can take another century or so to do so. There are lots of other areas of technological leadership. Jet engines that Russia has now started to make again, rocket engines, which the Americans buy to launch their spy satellites with which to spy on Russia. It has a unique icebreaker fleet. Now it's a major maker of vaccines for coronavirus. Sputnik V is licensed in dozens of countries at this point, and it's considered the safest vaccine right now. And it also has very powerful IT services. Russia is extremely stable financially. It's probably, of all the countries in the world, it's in the best situation financially. Huge gold and other reserves, minimal foreign debt, a positive trade balance of 100 and 120 billion billion dollars a year or so. People talk about capital flight from Russia of 25 billion, but if you look at how it's accounted for, it's not really flight, it's investment. A lot of that quote unquote capital flight is going to invest Russia's projects abroad, which create jobs within Russia. Russia's central bank can ignore the IMF, unlike most other countries. So the IMF is in no position to impose austerity on Russians. In fact, Russia has some influence on the IMF because it's an IMF donor. And Russia has undergone a huge transformation over the past 20 years under Putin. And this is typical for Russia. Either it sort of stagnates and languishes, or it goes through an incredible growth spurt and lots of breakthroughs, especially under duress. Russians uniquely function much better under duress than when things are good. Along these lines, Western sanctions have been extremely helpful. They've fueled import replacement. And the next step is export replacement, so that Russia produces goods for its own population instead of for export. And Russia is looking to curtail, in particular, energy exports. For instance, it's going to be making plastic for export instead of exporting the gas that is used to make plastic. So taking a step back, what is Russia really? It's not West or East, and trying to argue whether it's more West or more East is, in my opinion, the wrong approach. You've probably heard of the global South. That's a term that's thrown around a lot. The way to think about Russia, I think, is that Russia is the global North. It's the central Eurasian hub. It sits on top of the planet and dominates the entire northern hemisphere, geographically speaking. It owns the Arctic Ocean. They just built a big city, Sibera, on the Yamal Peninsula, And it is now exporting a liquefied natural gas from Siberia using an icebreaker tanker fleet that it has developed. These are liquefied natural gas tankers that are also icebreakers. And one has recently made it from the Yamal Peninsula through the Arctic Ocean to the Bering Strait unassisted in the middle of winter in January, which is a first. Russia owns the Eurasian pipeline network. Russia is the hub, and the rest of the world is pretty much its spokes. The thing to realize that economic activity scales with the use of oil, directly proportional. Oil use is directly proportional to gross domestic product. Renewables are pretty much at this point ready to be declared a failure. They produce intermittent energy, which is incompatible with industrial civilization, because what industrial civilization needs is a stable grid. The other thing to realize is that US shale oil is dying, and the US was really the last swing producer. Saudi Arabia has pretty much capitulated. It recently unilaterally cut its production by 1 million barrels a day. Its oil fields are very old, and it's trying to nurse them along for as long as possible because it has no other resources left. So few people really talk about this because the ramifications of this are so dire, but Russia now controls the global oil market. Now in the US, there's also a problem coming up with natural gas, because natural gas production in the US is mostly what's called concomitant production to shale oil production. And a lot of that gas that has been produced has already been flared because it's so expensive to pipe gas from shale oil sites. So the US is going to end up as a resource scarce country, not really a global competitor to Russia. As far as restoring the USSR, I'd like to put that to rest. There isn't a chance. The USSR was an empire in reverse. It pumped resources into the periphery while impoverishing the core, the Russian core, except for Moscow and St. Petersburg or Leningrad. Those two cities received preferential treatment. But countries around Russia do have a choice. They can reintegrate into the Russian world. And here's a list of countries that are doing that: Belarus, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and some Central Asian republics, although that situation is rather volatile, so I'd rather not name any. And the other choice is to not align with Russia and depopulate and fail. That is the Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. These countries are failing because they have ruined their relationship with Russia. And in the long run, it seems that Russophobia really does not pay. Russophobic elites in the Baltics and in the Ukraine are quickly destroying and depopulating their countries. And the bottom line really is Russophobes pay more for oil and gas and get less trade. Russophobia is expensive. Russia is one of the few sovereign countries in the world. It really can decide what to do on its own. There are very few truly sovereign countries in the world. The way you can tell whether a country has any sovereignty is if it faces Western sanctions, then it's probably sovereign. So Russia does face some major challenges. One is to achieve digital sovereignty. So Yandex in Russia is a Google killer. But what Russia needs is a Microsoft killer, a YouTube killer, a Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok killer, and it needs to somehow rein in Telegram so that it's not organizing illegal protests from abroad. Another major challenge is to restore cultural sovereignty. It really was eroded starting in the 1960s, and this trend has accelerated after the Soviet collapse. So Western cultural imports corrupting the minds of Russian youth, that's a major, major problem. What Russia needs is homegrown, middle-brow culture, not highbrow, because that exists. Russia still has theater and ballet and symphony orchestras and all of that sort of stuff. But it needs to bring up the cultural level of popular culture, but not lowbrow culture, something that basically improves people's cultural level of cultural development. And some cultural imports can be good, the ones that strengthen families and communities. So one must pick and choose. Another major challenge for Russia is its pro-Western elites. This has been a problem ever since Peter the Great. For Russia to seek accommodation with the West and to just open itself up for Western influence is always a prescription for failure. But the big plus here is that the West no longer looks particularly attractive through Russian eyes. It is seen as a very disruptive place. Yet throughout the country, after the period, there was a lot of good infrastructure, but it's old. A lot of it needs to be replaced. So there's a building boom going on. Lots of road building. You can a lot of videos of before and after of Russian cities, and the transformation is just remarkable. And last one thing that Russia needs to do is undo the damage of misguided liberal, quote unquote, reforms in medicine, education, and other fields. And here the coronavirus has been very helpful in undoing optimization in medicine. Basically, Soviet-style medicine is being brought back, public health. And it's remarkable that the fully optimized medicine in the US and the UK produces the world's worst outcomes. It's a good cautionary example. Also, this has allowed Russia to prepare for the possibility of bioterror attacks. I don't know how many people know, but Pentagon has bioterror labs pretty much surrounding Russia. There are ones in the Ukraine, there are ones in Georgia, basically pretty close to Russia's borders. And nobody knows whether they're dangerous or just stupid. Remember how much the Pentagon wastes money. Maybe they're just a waste of money, but in any case, Russia is now much better prepared. So to start summing it up, Eurasia is central and Russia is central to Eurasia. Pipelines are cheaper than tankers, and you can't ship electricity. The periphery, just because of resource constraints, the periphery will tend to wither and dwindle. And the island of stability and prosperity is going to be centered on Russia. It could be an island or within pipeline and electric grid range. There'll be a gray zone with some economic development centered around production centers, corporate campuses, but surrounded virtually by wasteland. And then there'll be the huge black zone, which is resource scarce areas of permanent instability. So I hope that you want to join the effort and help Russia and become part of the archipelago. I think the first step really is to learn the language because it carries the strange and unique Russian mindset. And without it, I think that people who try to interact with Russia and integrate with it will face a lot of frustration and confusion. So my advice is to go native as much as possible. Copy the positive, let's say, ethnic stereotypes that you see around you. Emulate them. One of the things that gets in the way is the individualistic Western mindset, because outside of a few big cities in Russia, Moscow, St. Petersburg, a few others, a lot of the countryside and a lot of the smaller cities are not really survivable with that mindset because they're all about cooperation. People must cooperate to survive in this harsh climate and these huge distances. It all must be community-centric and cooperative. And in general, I would say that the right approach to Russia is to approach it not as a country, but as a distinct civilization, and a very important one. Thank you, and I'll be 20 minutes and 23 seconds. Pretty good. And now I'll be happy to answer your questions if you have any. Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dmitry. Appreciate that. We will open it up to questions as we have for all of our meetings. And what I will ask the people to do is please raise your hand if you have a question for Dmitry. He's going to be here and answer questions for us. I see that Randall already has his hand up. So Randall, I'll let you ask the first question.
Okay, thank you, Michael. The advantage of asking the first question is I might be able to ask a second one later on. I would like to ask Dmitry, today I learned something, a new word. It's not often I learn a new word in English. Every day I'm learning new words in Russian, struggling as I am with the grammar. But I learned a new word in something that Dmitry wrote recently, and the word is antonomasia. I think that's the pronunciation. And I wonder if Dmitry could explain a bit, what does antonomasia mean? And why did he write about it?
Oh yeah, well, because it's a tool of propaganda. It's when you objectify someone by replacing their proper designation with some kind of an epithet or a moniker that can often be derogatory. So instead of saying the president of the Russian Federation, you say Russia's authoritarian dictator. It automatically shifts the discussion from something that can be a discussion to basically a piece of propaganda. It completely destroys the information value of what's being offered.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dmitry. Very good. Howard, you have a question. I'll get to you in a moment, Stan. Howard first.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciated the comments that Dmitry made about Russia. They're very, well, let's say, positive from the Russian side. And I have been going back and forth to Russia for the past 30 years. And я говорю почти свободно по-русски.
Отлично.
Пожалуйста. My question, though, is in this current news situation that we find ourselves in Russia, and that is the Navalny trial and the really major demonstrations that have taken place. And I know the Rotary Forum is not excessively political, but it just has always bothered me that there seems to be a fear of democracy as a form of chaos, which might overtake Russia if it becomes too democratized and allows a little voices of dissent to creep in from the sides. And Navalny seems to be the latest, most popular figure. And if, as you say, the Russian strength is in its culture, its population, it's a very strong country, I believe, and McCain was completely off base. But with all the strength that Putin has, and he's popular in the polls, why the Navalny hysteria?
Well, I could explain the Navalny phenomenon pretty well. He's basically an agent for both sides. The Westerners, by funding him and throwing money at him and giving him lots of support, think that they are disrupting Russia and getting it softened up for regime change. But what people in Russia think is that Navalny is really, really excellent at destroying Russian opposition. The Russian opposition movement, which was really quite strong in 2016-17, fielding huge crowds and being fairly inclusive of various ideas, various approaches, etc. It was really an opposition movement, and a lot of new voices were heard. Navalny has single-handedly destroyed them by becoming incredibly toxic because he's a criminal. He's a convicted felon, and nobody really wants to be anywhere near him anymore. But now that his job is done, and his latest ploy has been to get underage people to go and protest in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic out in the streets by relying on foreign media and venues such as TikTok and Telegram, all from abroad. basically, he has made himself into a laughingstock to a point where, even his curators within the Kremlin say, okay, well, the system where laws do not apply to Navalny, the Navalny exception, where he can be paroled for 2 criminal the terms of his parole as many times as he wants. Okay, no longer. So he gets to hang out in jail. And all of the other criminal cases pending against him are probably going to move forward. So he's finished.
Thank you. Okay, Stan, hold on, Daniel. Stan was next. Go ahead, Stanley.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. Fascinating comments. I'm wondering, you paint a very positive, sanguine picture of Russia. I'm wondering, what about the demographic situation? The demographic situation is a serious problem there. And I mean, are they going to open up the borders somewhat to, they're going to need to, as it were, import some population, I think, to maintain the economy. Now, maybe I'm wrong there, but I'd like you to address that particular question.
Well, Russia is a major immigrant attractor. I think that there are less immigrants coming to Russia than the United States, although that situation is changing and may have already changed. But Russia is very attractive to people from the surrounding countries, especially the Ukraine. Depending on how things go in Belarus, a lot of the Belarusians who can now easily get a Russian passport will move to Russia as well. And you have to keep in mind that, there's a huge Russian diaspora. About 20 million Russians live outside of the Russian Federation. And as border restrictions relax, a lot of these people will probably be realizing that wherever they happen to be stuck, be it Germany or the United States or some other country that happens to be down on its luck these days, they should probably consider moving back to Russia. In fact, there has been quite a trend like that. I'm one of the people who moved back to Russia. I know lots of other people who moved back to Russia. And so that's one thing that's happening. The other thing is that the Russian government has been doing lots and lots of things, from very low interest rate mortgages to outright free housing, to putting together maternity clinics and building lots of kindergartens and lots of schools, to giving cash subsidies to people who have more than one child, significant ones, that is encouraging Russia to boost the birth rate. The problem is that there's a resonance, demographic resonance of World War II and then the Soviet collapse in the 90s. Very few people were born during that period of time. I have a niece who was the only child born on that street that year. It was an incredible, period of hardship for people. And it resonates so that, for instance, my niece is now of childbearing age, but there are so few of even if she had like 2-3 kids, that still would create a little blip in the demographic picture. But over time, this is going to be smoothed out. And the dire predictions that Russians are going to go extinct within n number of generations, that has turned out to be nonsense already. So the demographic picture is not rosy, but it's much better than Germany. It's much better than Japan. The US is currently looking horrible as far as demographics. So I think it's misplaced focus, really.
Okay. Thank you, Dmitry. Thank you. Edward, you were next.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Thank you. So I can see here Dmitry was having the option to live in the United States and then returning back to Russia, and he can have a perspective on seeing things happening in both sides. That's why it's very interesting to listen to him, and very interesting comments. My question for Dmitry here is, what made him to return back to Russia? what was missing in the United States?
Well, it was a progression. First, I realized that it doesn't matter whether I live in Boston, where I used to live. I could just get on a sailboat, sail off, and wherever I can catch a Wi-Fi connection, there I am. Nobody really cares where I am physically within the United States. Then I realized that I don't have to be in the United States either. So for the winter, I would sail down to Central America and do the same thing there, Costa Rica, Panama. And that was nice too. But then it was time for my son to go to school. And I thought, well, he's a Russian kid, you know, so the normal thing to do is to have him go to school in Russia. So we moved back to Russia. And the way the world is now, it really doesn't matter where you are physically. So I live in St. Petersburg, but during the summer, I spend pretty much the entire summer at the country house, where there's, 4G and a good internet connection, broadband, very cheap. And again, nobody cares where I am in the world. I can do all the same stuff. So really, it was a question of, well, where do I want to be, and what's to stop me? And the answer is, I want to be in Russia, and there's nothing to stop me.
All right then.
Okay.
So
Very
now
good, thank
you moved back basically because your child was on the way going to school, starting school. So you prefer him to be schooled in Russia instead of the United States.
Well, that was one consideration out of many. Another is that the way the currency markets have been manipulated, it is better to earn dollars and spend rubles than the other way around. So if you want to be rich, move to Russia. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, you'll still be better off in Russia.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Randall, you have your hand up, and then we'll take another one of the guests.
Yeah,
Kai,
yes. Dmitry, you talked a bit about how Russia is not overpopulated. And we know that Eastern Russia is very, very much not overpopulated, and it borders China, which is very populous. What do you think about the relations between China and Russia, and especially in the Far East or eastern half of Russia? Do you think Chinese will be immigrating to Russia? Will Russia allow that? Will Chinese be taking economic control of parts of Eastern Russia?
Well, the Chinese have had, what, 6,000 or 8,000 years to do that, but they haven't. So I don't think there's much of a reason to think that they'll suddenly change their mindset, which is very insular. The Chinese are the Middle Kingdom to them is the heartland, and everything else is just not them. And they just don't really do very well in the wilds of the Russian Far East. They go there for specific things. They go there to pick fiddleheads, fur and fiddleheads. Whole armies of the Chinese descend on the Far East and do that one thing, or they pick wood mushrooms or something. And then they go back to China because that's really where they want to be. They don't really want to colonize the Russia's Far East. I don't think Russia would be particularly adverse to them doing it. It's just not happening, and it's not likely to happen. The specifics of the place, the climate, and most of the other things about it are ideally suited to the Russian character, not the Chinese character. And those characters are fairly immutable and have persisted well over 1,000 years at this point. So I don't see any major changes there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Kai, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael, and thank you very much, Dmitry Orlov. So indeed, very fascinating presentation. So I was a little bit, actually I was a bit wondering why there was no opposition or something, but at Rotary we are non-political, and I think it's tonight very important to keep this in mind, that you can look neutrally also on very difficult things. Personally, I like to hear that Russia has a bright future ahead, and it also would give me like some kind of confirmation that it was the right choice to go to Russia to learn the language and maybe to participate in this good upcoming things. Let's hope for them. I was a little bit wondering, so you were also putting focus on, or a little bit focus against this classical Western approach of being an individualistic human being and not to be too connected to a community of a village somewhere or a city. But aren't we, like maybe most of us here, these individualistic people? So especially you with your very fantastic profession, and as you said, that you were able to go with a sailboat and still to work and so on. So I'm a little bit afraid, like, or would like to ask you if you also see such a risk. But if we go back to the good old times, like maybe Soviet style or so on, that indeed we will suffer, like from limiting our chances as an individual human being and have to follow some, like a group or community instead of going our own ways.
Yes, absolutely. You give up a great deal of autonomy by being part of Russian society, integrating into it. Basically, you have to deal with what goes here, and going your own way, you reach a dead end pretty quickly. And this is a mindset difference. I think it's even stricter in China. I think Russia has a great deal more latitude than, say, Chinese society, even though it has made strides in making itself more and more individual friendly, let's say. But this is really something to keep in mind, that you can't just basically come here and say, well, I'm an individual, I'll do what's right for me, and that's it. It really is an environment where it takes a great deal of cooperation, not only to get anything done, but to merely survive. And so that is an important thing to keep in mind. As far as what you would sacrifice, I think the Russians are a lot less lonely than people in the West. And this is something that people come here and quickly realize, that the trade-off is really worthwhile, because on the one hand, you lose some freedom, but on the other hand, you lose a lot of loneliness, a lot of isolation and alienation.
Okay, very good. Any other hands up? Antonina. Daniel, I'll get to you next, Daniel.
I had trouble with internet connection. So my question is back to demography. Dmitry, there is huge difference between average lifespans of Russian men and Russian women. How you can explain it to me? Because I'm worried. I have Russian roots. I also have experience of Russian relatives, men dying at 59. So what do you think about it? I'm sorry.
Well, the life expectancy for Russian men is over 70. I'm not sure what it is for women. I think it's more. And if you look at how men and women work in Russia, a lot of the women are, school teachers, they're doctors, they're bureaucrats of various kinds. They work office jobs. What are the men doing? They're out there unprotected from the elements. Who is there to fell huge forests, to build the railroads, to maintain the infrastructure? They're outside, and they're outside no matter what the weather is. If it's minus 35, you work if it's minus 35. It wears you out. It's just physically harder in Russia to be a man than a woman. There's a lot of physical labor involved. This will always be the case because that's what the climate is. And so men don't live as long. They wear out more quickly. This is to be expected. And it's also, there's nothing wrong about it, because old women are very important because they're grandmothers, and grandmothers have a very important role to play in nurturing one generation or 2 generations ahead. Whereas old men are just not very useful compared to old women. So they might as well die, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Thank you, Dmitry.
I'm talking from Canada, and climate in Canada is very similar to Russia in terms of harsh conditions as well. So, but we have no such difference.
Well, I've been to Canada a lot, and Canada is actually a strip about 15 miles wide along the US border where people live. And then everything beyond that is wilderness that I've driven through. There's nothing there. You might say, oh, there's Yellowknife or something. Well, how many people are there in Yellowknife? Russia has huge cities of hundreds of thousands of people above the Arctic Circle. And the other thing is that, you know, Canada, compared to Russia, Canada is not that big. The continental zone of the super harsh climate, again, it's the prairie states, and most of the people there live pretty far south along the border. And there isn't anything comparable to the temperature extremes of Russia. So I think it's an apples and oranges comparison, really.
Okay. Thank you, Dmitry. Daniel Fuchs, you're next. Unmute yourself, please, Daniel.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Dmitry, that you give us the chance and the honor to talk to you, to someone who knows so well Russia and gives us some insights. Still, I'm going to be the one probably, and I have here to refer to Kai as before, the one to challenge you a little bit. But before I will do that with my questions, I just want to clear up a little bit about my background so you won't misunderstand me. I'm a true friend of Russia. I've been living in St. Petersburg now for the past 3.5 years. I am Austrian. I come from the center of Europe. I've been living in Eastern Europe for more than 10 years. Now together, if you count Russia to that as well, for almost 13, 14 years. So I have also some experience and comparison experience mainly. And what you mentioned before, what you said in principle, I agree that Russia has very low debt compared to the GDP. But the question is, why is then the ruble so devaluing? And they have actually all the resources in the country, and they are actually energy autark. So why then still the average income in Russia is so low? And you said before that taking so much focus on public health, but actually the state, nobody cares about Corona. And they have in reality much higher rates of Corona infections and deaths as are being published. They even just came out 2 months ago that the statistics actually are wrong, and they're double in numbers as they are published. When you look into the hospitals, so why is that even though you have the lowest taxes, the public infrastructure is one of the worst in Eastern Europe? And even as you mentioned that Russia controls the oil market, even here I have to challenge you. Russia is, of course, has one of the largest resources, but it is not that Saudi Arabia surrendered, as I understood that you explained it. It's rather that they made a deal with the US to save the shale oil and gas industry in order to bring the price up, because above $50 per barrel, shale industry produces profits. Before that, there was a fight between Russia and Saudi Arabia, and the result was that the price went down, and Saudi Arabia cut actually the oil production by 1 million barrels per day in order to get the price up and to rescue the American oil industry, because they can afford it. And Russia actually here can also afford it because the wage level is low, because the resources are sufficient, and they don't have a problem in that sense. The same is, as you say, We need like, and I totally agree. We need some counterpart to YouTube and to Google and to Apple and to all the tech companies. But with an economy here that is so much state controlled, you cannot promote invention, because invention is being killed. And that is the reason why you don't have, or you have only so little high-tech inventions coming from Russia. The venture capital industry is growing, and also startups are growing. It's also supported. So when you see all that, and you said the oligarchs, or this is the elite, they have a Western, they see it like in a Western way, or I have to say that that is actually what how they would explain, or how they would describe Russia, as you just did before, because this is just the positive part. And my question now to you is, because I see myself as a true friend of Russia, and to speak and poke on the problems that exist here, because in my opinion, Russia could be, or should be, one of the richest countries in the world by living standard, by public health sector, technology-wise, and at the end, as I say, it's a standard of living. And let's take the environmental approach. Siberia and the north, they're dying because of the climate change. It's just put into the shelf and they have huge problems up there, because the soil is heating up, methane gas is coming out, they lose infrastructure due to that, ice is melting, there are huge problems. The forests are dying. So my question to you is, Russia has this huge potential to be one of the richest countries in the world, for the people, not for the government I'm talking about, to have one of the highest standard of living they could achieve. So what should Russia do, in your opinion, to turn that and to get on the track and to diversify the economy that is totally oil and gas based? And that's also the problem why people lost now their wages in the past 1.5 years due to the corona crisis and to the decline of the oil price. So what is your recommendation here? And that, I think, would be an
well, I could go through everything you say and contradict you point by point, but it would take too long a time. So I'll just answer your overall question. Russia should do absolutely nothing along the lines you recommend. Absolutely nothing, because there's nothing that will destroy Russia faster than affluence. It will lose its character. It will lose its soul. It has to be a harsh, austere place that forces other people to keep out. Unless they accept the way Russia is, the way it is, they have no business being here. As far as venture capitalism, well, there's a big venture capitalist in Russia. It's called the Russian government. It controls about 3/4 of the economy. They do once in a while develop something really cool, like all these weapons that are much better than anything anyone else has or will ever have, which has secured Russia's security for many decades ahead. You know, that is innovation. That's an achievement, and it's important. As far as income problems, well, Russia doesn't really have much of a problem with poverty, and it's shrinking all the time. There just isn't that much poverty here compared to, say, the United States. The UN confirms it. Everybody confirms it. You know, in the United States, there are people in absolutely dire situations. There are no lines for food being handed out in Russia. There's no malnutrition in Russia to speak of. So, you know, there's just what your entire question was to spun together a narrative of tiny falsehoods that you've stitched together. I could refute them one by one, but it would take me a long time, so I'm not going to do it.
All right, thank you, Dmitry. We got 2 more questions and then we're going to be done and we'll have to stop. Walter, you're next, and then Natalia to finish up. Walter, go ahead.
Thank you very much, President Michael. Thank you very much, Dmitry, for your opinions on this issue. I was raised in Soviet Union at the age of 8 and then moved to Germany with my family, as so-called Russian Germans. And now I've been for 2 years, 1.5, 2 years living in St. Petersburg as well, as a matter of my background. I have one question. You said from your perspective that a lot of young and TikTok people in terms of very, probably very active demonstrants or whatever, I don't want to go into this issue, are the followers who we see now on TV following the riots or whatsoever on the streets. My question is, and this is something I've experienced myself, how does this generational gap, which I think Russia might experience, will be working when you have on the one hand the old traditional, maybe post-Soviet regime opening up to capitalism regulations, but still operating on a very Sovietish style. On the other hand, you have the new generation, which is totally digitalized, which is totally open to other opinions, of the understanding of various behaviors. How will these communication, the handover to the next generation work when they're, from my perspective, I don't think it is a handover, as I probably sometimes realize in my German past, where the next generation to hand over the company, the steering roles, the household, and so forth, is being kind of neutrally and optimistically handed over to the leadership, to the next generation, by more or less the common and the current global perspective. I don't know if you see some challenges here between those generations. Thank you.
Well, I see a really interesting and somewhat bizarre trend, which is Navalny's supporters keep getting younger. I think during this wave of demonstrations, what you saw in those demonstrations were lots and lots of reporters, lots and lots of undercover cops. And in fact, the undercover cops are the sort of chaperone minders who were there to make sure that the little kids didn't get hurt. And then little kids, and each time Navalny tried to organize this protest thing that he does, the kids keep getting younger. So, you know, now he's going after 12-year-olds to get them out to protest. What's he going to do next? Infants? I don't know. Fetuses? Who's going to be his base? Because what happens is that people grow up and realize that he is a fool and no longer follow him. So you have to be younger and younger and stupider to realize to not realize that he's basically a crook. And that's as far as that whole protest movement goes. And now he's in jail and it's over. There's a lot of other opposition in Russia that is slowly taking shape. I don't know how it'll go, where it'll end up. There really hasn't been much opposition at all. You know, there's this tendency in Russia to say that the people and the party are one. There's no need for opposition. Everybody just has to agree, and that's the end of politics. That doesn't really work all that well. There should be, you know, a plurality of voices heard, but so far I haven't really seen it. There's basically, you know, there's the United Russia, the systemic party. There's Zhirinovsky. If Zhirinovsky is out of the picture, then his party pretty much disappears, because LDPR is not really thinkable without Zhirinovsky. Then, you know, the communists are basically sellers of Soviet-style kitsch at this point. They really don't have anything except memorials and flags and things and all of that. It's a nostalgia party more than anything else. and rather corrupt. And then you have this howling wilderness of the mind that's left over from the destroyed opposition movement, which disintegrated. A few Western financed news organizations, there's all that's really left, like Echo Moskvy, Echo of Moscow, few others, Deutsche Welle is trying to do something or other, BBC is trying to do something or other, not really penetrating, but that's all fake. And then I don't really know whether it's going to go anywhere, but 3 opposition parties have just merged into one. Maybe something will come off that by this fall, by the time it's time for the State Duma elections. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Dmitry. And we only got time for one more question. Natalia, you were last. Natalia?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dmitry. Most interesting to listen to, but I feel protest inside me because as a native Russian who has always lived in Petersburg, I see quite a different picture. Of course, I cannot judge about huge industries, and I can only speak for myself and for the students that I have been working with for all my life. And I can tell you that you sounded far more optimistic than what I feel and what the young people feel. The situation in education is very bad. A lot of it has been damaged or destroyed. The situation in healthcare is just awful. The life in villages and small places, I don't know if you traveled there.
I have.
Have no jobs. Old people drink vodka. So the young people that I work with, they're students, and most of them want to move out of Russia to find jobs anywhere. Lots of them went out to the streets lately, and practically all of them said to me, with those who I spoke with, it's not Navalny that we're supporting, even though we are sorry for him. People cannot be treated like that, but we are supporting, we are trying to defend our future. We don't want to live in a country which is so conservative, so aggressive, and so poor at the same time. My opinion is that Russia should be rich, independent, and not afraid of any influences, and never hide itself from the other world. Because as you said, those liberals, they are all sort of, as I understood it, sorry if I misunderstood you, liberals are supported or financed by the West. No, not that I know. Those people that I work with, they have independent minds. So as for men and women, my opinion has always been that women are more active. They do more work. They have to do things quickly at home, and then they rush to their jobs. Men are more passive, and passive life does not make their lives longer. And it's my personal opinion. So now I come to a question. So what do you think?
I was waiting for that.
Yeah,
I was waiting for the question.
Yeah, okay. So the question is, to what extent do you think should Russia be separated or closed from the West? Because as you presented it, I may be wrong, we have all kinds of bad influence from the West.
Well, the West put up an iron curtain against the Soviet Union, and it may be time to reverse this relationship. because the West is heading into rather uncertain times. My feeling is that it's one major financial collapse away from ruined, along with the United States. I'm waiting for this event. I have been for a long time. So far, everything's adding up. And so it may be time to put up an iron curtain along Russia's western border.
No, thank you.
All right.
Well,
All right.
well, you can choose which side of that border to be on. You know,
Yeah.
you can always leave.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalia, and thank you, Dmitry. For all of us, I think on everybody here on the screen, agree, disagree, or whatever your thoughts are, it's very interesting to hear someone like Dmitry and his viewpoint and his background to facts and data to back up his position. It's interesting to hear it because we don't always hear what the other people think other than ourselves. We see the propaganda, we see the news, both positive and negative news, and it's interesting to hear another voice crying out from Russia. Maybe crying out is not the right word, Dmitry, but another voice who's speaking out and saying how they feel and what they think about the situation. I think it's very, very interesting, and I'm very happy we were able to have him here so that we could hear difference of opinion from some other people. So I'd like for all of us, like him or not, agree or don't agree with him, all of us, let's give him a round of applause for his coming on board and speaking tonight. Thank you very, very much, Dmitry. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I've got about 5 minutes of work here that I need to do as president of the club, and I get through just very quickly through what I need to get through. If you'll hang on, we'll be wrapping things up here in just a few minutes. Coming up for us, we have, let me get my screen changed here 1 second. We have a meeting on 10 February, and as Randall said earlier, Reinhard Kuhn is going to be here, and he's going to be talking about his efforts to run an amateur radio station that worked with China to get them to the other side of the moon. So it should be very, very interesting to hear how an individual radio operator from a foreign country was able to help the Chinese in their mission. On the 17th, we will be have a closed meeting. Only our members, as Rotarians, you understand that we do have closed meetings periodically where we talk about internal business and internal issues. We'll be doing that on 17th February. On the 24th, on the screen, it says open meeting. We do have a speaker. Andres Bone, our treasurer, is going to be coming on board and talking about his occupation, which is something that we want to start doing now. And he's in a company that's importing parts from other parts of the world into the tobacco industry here in Russia. Been doing it, very successful at it for a number of years. And it's going to be interesting to hear him speak. On the 3rd of March, we have Alexander Saboni, who is a past president here, one of our founders. He's going to be talking about how they got started and what the initiatives were when they first got started with our organization. I would like to give you an update on our project. Many of you already know about our project. I need to go off screen just 1 second here, please. Most of you know about our project. We have a project for the Children's Rehabilitation Center. It's a center for children with cerebral palsy. And the center here has recently been visited by us in the fall, and it was very, very well done. Very clean, very well organized. And out of 193 organizations in Russia, it was ranked number 3, very close to number 1 as being the best as far as open books, finance, cleanliness, organization, the whole structure. It was ranked number 3. So it's a very, very well-run center, the Children's Rehabilitation Center here in St. Petersburg. We decided 6 years ago to provide them with a machine they needed so that they could scan the shape of an individual child's foot and build a mold for his shoe and for the braces to support him. Before, they had done that by hand with molding something around the child's foot and then taking the mold and trying to build a shoe. Now they have a machine to do it electronically. They're doing great, great work. And the children that go there, most of them cannot walk when they enter. They cannot walk. Most of them are either carried in or rolled in a wheelchair. And then after they are there for a period of time, in the case of Goran here, he is in the process right now, hasn't finished, but we're sponsoring him, and he's going to get over 500 hours of therapy, massages, exercises, muscle movement. He's developing an awful lot of movement, more than he had before. And Andres Bowen, our member who's not here tonight, went and visited with him a few weeks over there, and he's actually standing up with crutches now. He's not walking yet, but he's able to stand up with crutches. He is proceeding to grow. It is our club's project. It is our focus of the club, and we're open to contributions from anyone in the world, be Rotarian or non-Rotarian. We're looking for additional contributions. We have a goal of 10,000 euro this year, and hopefully that will sponsor 4 to 5 children. But we want to make sure that happens. I just went down to Houston 2 weeks ago online, and one of the clubs down there donated $2,000 to help us get going in that project. So we are looking for contributions. We do want to help these children, and it is a very worthwhile organization. It is our focal project for our club. So if your club or your organization, if your ICC group or your local club or as an individual, you want to contribute, we certainly are here and would be appreciative of any donations or contributions that you would like to offer us. Just want to make sure that you understand our club is not just social, not just speakers, not just bringing you online, but we're also trying to help the local community. And that's what Rotarians are trying to do all over the world. Service before self. Try to help others. Most of us are surviving this crisis. Most of us are getting by one way or another, but there's a lot of people who aren't, and a lot of people who are struggling. And like with Goran's family, he had a father and mother. His father left after he found out he had a crippled child, and his mother's been suffering, trying to get through life with him. She brought him to the center, but didn't have the money. We were able to come up with the money for them, and Goran's going to get his cure. He's going to get the treatment that he needs to be able to walk again. A 7-year-old boy needs to be running and playing with everybody, not sitting in a wheelchair, not lying in a bed. Goran will be able to do that because of our contributions. And a few of you have also helped already send sponsor money to us, and it will be going to the next child as we're building funds for the next child. So thank you very, very much for the contributions that have been made, and we still need a whole lot more out there. I would like to wrap, whoops, wrong button, Michael, get rid of that owl. I would like to wrap this meeting up because we are at our time limit that we had set for ourselves. We're just a little bit over, but we'll continue here for just a few more minutes. And we would like to welcome all of you back again next week. We're going to have another interesting speaker. I hope you see that our club is open to all kinds of people. Tonight, Dmitry's presentation might have been controversial, might have been different, but I think it's very interesting to always hear what other people have to say. So the floor is open. If you know somebody who's in a position and they are a speaker and they have a reputation of speaking at other clubs or other places, we would like their information so that we can contact them. Randall's been doing a very good job of following up with these speakers that have been recommended to us by our own members and others. And we want to continue to provide that for you. Tonight, we had 29 people at the peak, a little bit short of what we'd like with 30 or 40, but we appreciate you coming to our meetings because we're trying to give you information. We're trying to give you people who have interesting stories, and we're trying to continue to network. Zoom has allowed us to reach around the world. I counted the people this evening. 7 different countries represented. Go back 2 years ago, just 2 short years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. How many meetings had people from 7 different countries at one meeting? Not very many, unless it was a planned international meeting. Normally, you don't get that mix. We have that opportunity here, and we want to keep that opportunity going. So please come back. Please follow us so that you can see other people speaking. And if you're interested in our project, certainly let us know, and we'll be happy to work with you and negotiate with you as to how you can support children from the Cerebral Palsy Center so that they can walk again. Thank you all very, very, very much for being here this evening. Now I'm going to go back to our galley view. We do have a few members on board. Walter, do you have any closing comments? Walter is one of our members. Closing comments, Walter? None?
No, I was just clapping for you to pointing out that everyone can also contribute it, because we have always very often questions how people from abroad can also contribute to our Branches project, which we almost closed, and now to the rehabilitation center. Yeah.
Right. And it's going well. Kai, our past president, any closing comments?
I enjoyed today's controversial discussion. So I think it was kind of a limit I would accept for such a meeting, but how to say, still happy that we had it. And yes, thank you, and Brenda a lot for organizing.
Rami, any comment? Close a member?
All okay, all good.
Great. All right. And again, for all of you, I know that if I open the floor to everybody, 20-something people, you all would have comments to say, and I appreciate that, but I want to make sure our members who of this club have the opportunity to speak up. It is their club. They're the ones that are putting it together and doing the work here on our side. And for all the people, the folks that from Jorg, who's working with the ICC, and for David and Howard and all these people around the world who been writing to us, talking to us, trying to help us. We're going to continue that. And what we see ourselves here as possibly a link, I don't know what kind of link, we haven't determined it, but between the Russian and the US, or Russian and German, or Russian and Israel, because Felix is not here tonight, who we normally have from Israel, has always been coming to our meetings. He's absent tonight. We are available to try to interact. And one of the ways to do that is that if you have somebody that you know who can be a speaker to come in and talk about their issue. As of right now, we've not had anybody come in and really speak about the ICC yet to our whole audience. We know some of you are involved in that, but we've not had any of you come in to talk about what the ICC is doing and so forth, and just give us an overview. So maybe that's something that we do in the near future, but we would like to cooperate and work with you. Many of you have already been listening to us, seeing our messages, and you do participate. We thank you very, very much. We're appreciative. We're a small 10-person club, and we have almost 30 people every week. That you only have that reach because you have good people supporting you, and you people have been helpful for us. So we appreciate that very, very much. So David just walked away from his microphone, but he raised his hand. So I'm going to close the official part of the meeting in just a moment. And after I close it, we'll be on board for about another 8 to 10 minutes, and we will chat. If you have any comments or any information or something you want to pass on, that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and close the official part of the meeting.